The council's demand arrived without preamble. No diplomatic greeting. No ceremonial opening. No acknowledgement of the 17 years humanity had spent as a contributing member of the Interstellar Governing Council, attending every session, honoring every resolution, paying every assessed contribution on time in full, without complaint. Just a demand. 11 words. Humanity will surrender governance of its outer colony systems immediately. Director Amara Solis read it standing at her office window overlooking Geneva at 0500 hours. The city was quiet below, the kind of quiet that exists in the gap between night and morning when the world belongs temporarily to nobody. She was 54, silver-locked, the kind of stillness that comes not from calm, but from having processed so many enormous things over so many years that the body learns to absorb impact without visible movement. She read the 11 words 4 times. Then she read the attached justification document. It was 3 pages long. It cited Council Resolution 7 KEF, a resource allocation framework passed 11 months ago that humanity had voted against and that 17 other species had voted for. It cited population density projections. It cited the outer colonies' mineral surveys. It cited galactic resource equity principles. It did not cite a single word of the Mutual Sovereignty Compact that humanity had signed on the day it joined the Council. Not one word. She set the document down, looked at the window, Geneva waking up below her, coffee, traffic beginning, a species going about its Tuesday morning completely unaware that something had just been demanded of it, something it had never given, something it was not going to give. She picked up her communicator, called her chief of staff. Wake the senior council, she said. Full assembly. 1 hour. The agenda? She looked at the 11 words still glowing on her screen. We're going to say something, she said quietly, that the council hasn't heard before. The senior council assembled in 47 minutes. 14 people, the specific 14 that Amara had spent 6 years building around a single shared quality. Not brilliance, not experience, not the particular credentials that looked impressive in official biographies. Judgment, the ability to sit with an enormous thing and think about it clearly without the thinking being contaminated by fear. She needed that quality this morning more than she had ever needed it. She put the demand on the main screen without introduction. 11 words. Let them read it. Let the silence that followed exist completely before she said anything into it. Admiral Kofi Mensah spoke first, 61 years old, the kind of career that had filed smooth every edge that wasn't load-bearing. They're citing Resolution 7 KEF. Yes, Amara said, we voted against 7 KEF. Yes. They passed it anyway and are now using it as legal basis for, he paused, choosing his word carefully, confiscation. Yes. He looked at the screen for a moment. That's not governance, he said. That's acquisition with paperwork. Yes, she said. It is. Dr. Una Park, Earth's chief legal counsel, 47, the person in the room whose opinion Amara trusted most on questions of galactic framework law, had been reading the justification document since the moment it appeared on her screen. She looked up at the 4-minute mark. The Mutual Sovereignty Compact, she said. They didn't cite it, Amara said. They couldn't cite it, Una said, because citing it would acknowledge it exists. And acknowledging it exists means acknowledging the demand violates it. She set her screen down, which means they know this is illegal. Which means, Admiral Mensah said, which means they did it anyway, Una said, knowing, deliberately, which is not a mistake or an oversight or an aggressive interpretation of Resolution 7 KEF. She paused. It's a test. The room absorbed that. Amara had arrived at the same conclusion at 0512 hours, standing at her window watching Geneva wake up. A test, not of Earth's military capability, not of its economic resilience, not of the specific measurable things that Council threat assessments typically evaluated. A test of something older and more fundamental. Whether humanity would accept a thing it should not accept because the alternative felt too large to contemplate. Whether 17 years of Council membership had made Earth the kind of species that calculated survival against principle and chose survival. They expect compliance, Amara said, or resistance they can characterize as aggression. Una said immediately, either outcome serve them. Compliance gives them the colonies. Aggression gives them justification for stronger measures. So, we give them neither, Mensa said slowly. Amara looked at him. Neither, she confirmed. What is neither? She looked around the table. 14 people. Judgment assembled in a room at 0547 hours on a Tuesday, while Geneva finished waking up outside. Neither, she said, is something the council's models don't have a category for. She paused. We're going to respond in a way that is not compliance and not aggression and not anything their 17-year assessment of humanity prepared them to expect. She looked at Una. How long to build an airtight legal case that the demand violates the compact? 48 hours, Una said. Maybe less. She looked at Mensa. And how long to make sure every outer colony is aware of what's been demanded and what we intend to do about it? 24 hours, he said. Then we have our timeline, Amara said. She looked at the 11 words on the screen one final time. Then she turned away from them. Get to work, she said. The council's demand became public at 0900 hours, not through a leak, not through the kind of accidental disclosure that happens when large institutions handle sensitive information carelessly, through Earth, deliberately, completely, with the full text of the demand, the full text of the justification document, and the full text of the Mutual Sovereignty Compact published simultaneously to every public information network humanity operated, galactic, interstellar, and local. Every word, unredacted, time-stamped, with a single line above it. Earth's citizens and the galactic community deserve to see exactly what has been asked of humanity and on what basis. It was Una's idea. She had proposed it at 0612 hours with the specific confidence of someone who has found the legal and strategic move that does two things simultaneously and does both completely. Transparency is not aggression, she had said. They cannot characterize publication of their own demand as a hostile act without acknowledging they intended the demand to remain hidden. She paused. Hidden demands only work on species that are afraid to show them. We're not afraid to show it, Amara said. No, Una agreed. We're not. The council's reaction arrived in 3 stages. Stage 1 was silence. 4 hours of it. The specific silence of an institution that has received something it didn't anticipate and is running the implications at speed while composing a response that accounts for the new situation. Stage 2 was a formal protest filed through official channels, citing Earth's publication as a violation of diplomatic confidentiality protocols. Una had prepared for this. Her response was 6 pages of Galactic framework law demonstrating that diplomatic confidentiality protocols applied to negotiations, not unilateral demands, that the Council's document had been delivered, not exchanged, that confidentiality required the consent of both parties and Earth had provided no such consent. 6 pages, filed within the hour. Stage 3 arrived the following morning. Not a communication, not a legal filing, a vote. The Council convened an emergency session, the second in 6 months, which was itself significant, and voted on a resolution formally demanding Earth's compliance within 72 hours. The vote was 31-6. Amara received the result at 0700 hours. Read it. Set it down. 31-6, Admiral Mensa said beside her. Yes. That's most of the Council. Yes. Does that change anything? Amara walked to the window. Geneva again. Different light. Now. Mid-morning, golden, the city fully alive. She had not slept. She was not sure when she would sleep next. She thought about 31 civilizations voting to take something from humanity. Not because humanity had wronged them. Not because the outer colonies had caused harm or violated agreements or done anything requiring remedy. Because they could. Because humanity had spent 17 years being a reliable, contributing, treaty-honoring member of an institution that had just demonstrated it considered reliability a vulnerability to exploit. She thought about the 6 who had voted no. 6 civilizations in a council of 37 who had looked at an illegal demand and voted against it. 6 civilizations worth knowing. Worth calling. It changes one thing, she said. What? Mensa asked. I know which 6 species to call first. She turned from the window. Get me their ambassadors, she said. Private channel. All 6 simultaneously. She paused. And get me the outer colony governors. Everyone. Another pause. It's time for them to hear directly from us what we intend to do. Which is? Mensa asked. Amara picked up the compact document, the one the council hadn't cited, the one they couldn't cite without acknowledging they were violating it. Honor this, she said simply, and make sure everyone watches us do it. The 6 ambassadors who had voted no were not who Amara expected. She had anticipated the Soul Pact. Their legal tradition made illegal demands philosophically uncomfortable regardless of political convenience. She had anticipated the Moran, ancient enough to recognize the pattern of what the council was doing and old enough to find it distasteful. She had not anticipated the Dreth. The Dreth Confederation was the council's 3rd largest military power. They had voted against humanity on 11 resolutions in 17 years. Their ambassador, a being named Counselor Vash, had personally argued against Earth's initial membership application. He appeared on Amara's private channel at 0900 hours with the specific expression of someone who has made a decision that surprised even themselves. Director Solis, he said. Counselor Vash, she said carefully. I want to say, I appreciate. I voted against the demand, he said, because it is illegal, not because I have revised my assessment of humanity. He paused. I want that clearly understood. Understood, she said. Good. Another pause. Now, what are you going to do? She told all 6 ambassadors simultaneously. The same briefing, the same information, the same honesty that Una had deployed in publishing the demand, the specific quality of transparency used not as performance, but as strategy. Earth was not going to comply. Earth was not going to resist militarily. Earth was going to do something the Council's emergency session had not discussed because the Council's emergency session had not considered it a possibility. Earth was going to the Galactic Framework Court. The Framework Court was older than the Council itself, established 4,000 years ago by civilizations that had decided disputes required neutral adjudication rather than power resolution. It had been used 47 times in its history. It moved slowly. Its decisions took years, and it had never once ruled in favor of a demand that violated a signed sovereignty compact. Not once. In 4,000 years, Una filed the case at 1,400 hours. Complete, meticulous, every document in its proper format with every citation correctly placed and every argument constructed on the specific foundation of law that the Council had deliberately chosen not to acknowledge when it issued its demand. The filing was simultaneously published to the public record. Again, everything visible, everything documented, the Council's demand, Earth's legal challenge, the compact they had violated, laid side by side in the Galactic Public Archive for every species, every independent system, every civilization watching to read and compare and reach their own conclusions. Counselor Vash called back at 1,600 hours. The Council is calling your filing a delay tactic, he said. The Framework Court is 4,000 years old. Amara said, we didn't build it. We're using it. They're saying you're using legal process to avoid compliance. We're using legal process, she said, because there is a legal process, built specifically for situations where a governing body exceeds its authority. She paused. If the Council's position is that legal processes shouldn't interfere with their demands, that position is itself worth publishing. A short silence. You're going to publish everything, Vash said. Not a question. Every response they make, she confirmed. Every filing. Every statement. Every vote. She paused. We are going to make the next 12 months the most thoroughly documented governance crisis in galactic history. Why? Amara thought about 31 civilizations voting to take something from humanity because 17 years of reliability had made them believe humanity would absorb it. About the 6 who hadn't. about every small species watching from the edges of galactic politics, trying to understand what the Council's demand meant for them. Because, she said, this isn't only about Earth. Vash was quiet for a long moment. No, he said finally, it isn't. Will the Dreth support the framework filing? Another pause. Longer. The Dreth Confederation, he said carefully, has its own legal counsel reviewing Resolution 7 Keth. He paused. We may have concerns about its application beyond the Earth situation. Amara understood immediately. The Dreth had outer territories too. Territories with mineral surveys, territories that Resolution 7 Keth, applied consistently, might reach. I see, she said simply. Yes, Vash said. I thought you might. The framework court acknowledged Earth's filing in 36 hours. 36 hours was extraordinarily fast for an institution that measured its processes in years. The acknowledgement arrived with a procedural note that Una read 3 times because the language was careful enough to require it. The court had granted emergency preliminary status to Earth's filing. Emergency preliminary status meant one thing in framework court procedure. The demand was suspended pending full adjudication. Una appeared in Amara's office doorway at 0630 hours, holding her screen with both hands. The specific body language of someone carrying information they haven't fully processed yet because it arrived faster than expected. Suspended, she said. Amara looked up from her desk. The demand is suspended, Una said, pending full adjudication, which means the 72-hour compliance deadline is legally unenforceable, Amara said. Yes. While the case proceeds. Yes. Una set the screen down, which could take 2 years, possibly 3. Amara sat with that for a moment. 2 years, possibly 3. The Council's emergency session had issued a 72-hour ultimatum to a species that had just turned it into a multi-year legal proceeding through the oldest adjudication institution in the known galaxy. How are they going to respond? Admiral Mensa asked from the corner where he had been reading his own briefings. Badly, Una said simply, she was right. The Council's response came in 2 parts. The first was a formal challenge to the Framework Court's emergency preliminary ruling. 40 pages. Dense, arguing that the court lacked jurisdiction over Council resolutions passed by proper voting procedure. Una read it in 2 hours. Her counter-response took 4. It was 61 pages. It cited the Framework Court's founding charter. It cited the specific jurisdictional language that the court's founders had deliberately written to cover exactly this category of dispute, a governing body exceeding authority granted by its own membership compacts. It cited 11 precedent cases spanning 4,000 years, none of which had gone the way the Council's 40 pages needed them to go. She filed it at 1800 hours, published it simultaneously. The second part of the Council's response was less formal. It came through back channels, whisper networks, the specific diplomatic underground that existed in every large institution where things got said that couldn't be said officially. The message was not subtle. Earth should understand that legal processes have limits, that framework courts issue rulings but do not enforce them, that the Council has mechanisms beyond legal procedure. Mechanisms beyond legal procedure. Amara read the back-channel message 3 times. Then she called Counselor Vash. They're threatening enforcement outside the legal process, she said. Yes, he said. He didn't sound surprised. That's a significant escalation. Yes. What does it mean practically? Vash was quiet for a moment. It means there are members of the Council's inner executive who believe the framework court proceeding has made them look weak, and that looking weak is more dangerous to their institutional position than the legal exposure of acting outside the court's preliminary ruling. So, they might move against the colonies regardless of the suspension. Some of them are advocating for it. Vash said, I want you to know that. Amara walked to her window. Geneva. Always Geneva. The city that had no idea how many enormous things had been decided while looking at it. She thought about mechanisms beyond legal procedure, about what that meant in practice, about council enforcement assets and their deployment range and the specific military geography of Earth's outer colony systems. She thought about 17 years of reliable treaty-honoring membership, and about what the Council had apparently concluded that reliability meant about humanity's willingness to defend what it had built. She turned from the window. "Admiral Mensah," she said. "Director. The outer colonies." "Yes." "Their defense infrastructure," she said carefully. "Current status." Mensah looked at her steadily. "Sufficient for their stated purpose," he said, "which has always been listed as infrastructure protection and civil emergency response. And if their stated purpose were to change?" A pause. "That would depend," he said carefully, "on what it changed to." "Self-defense," she said, "of sovereign territory. Under framework, court, preliminary protection." She held his gaze. "Would that change their capabilities?" Mensah was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. "Director," he said, "the outer colonies have been receiving infrastructure upgrades for 18 months. Quietly, categorized as civil development." He paused. "Some of that infrastructure is dual use." Amara nodded slowly. "How dual?" she asked. "Sufficiently," he said. She picked up her communicator. "Called Una. The back-channel threat," she said. "I want it published." Silence. "Amara," Una said carefully, "publishing an unofficial threat. Shows the galaxy that the Council is considering acting outside a framework court preliminary ruling," she said, "which is not an escalation by us. It's documentation of theirs." She paused. "Publish it, with full context. Let every species watching decide what it means when a governing body threatens to ignore its own legal institutions." A pause. "That will accelerate things," Una said. "Yes," Amara said. "Are we ready for that?" She thought about dual-use infrastructure, about 6 ambassadors, about the framework court's 4,000-year record, about 31 species who had voted to take something from humanity, and 6 who hadn't, and 40 independent systems who had been watching very carefully since Earth walked out of a summit 3 months ago. "We've been ready," she said, "since 500 hours on a Tuesday." The back-channel threat was published at 0800 hours. Full context. Complete documentation. The original message, the diplomatic network it had traveled through, the seniority level of its origin, traced and verified by Earth's Intelligence Division over 48 hours, and presented with the specific clinical precision of people who had been building a case, not reacting to events. The galactic response was not immediate. It built. The first signal came from the Sol Pact, 12 hours after publication. A formal statement expressing concern about Council executive members advocating action outside framework, court, preliminary rulings. Language careful and measured. The Sol didn't use inflammatory words, but the concern was real, and it was on the record, and it had the Sol's full diplomatic weight behind it. The Moran followed 6 hours later. Then the Dreth Confederation. And this one carried different weight, because the Dreth were not small and not neutral and had voted against humanity 11 times in 17 years. Their statement was 3 sentences. It said that framework court preliminary rulings existed to be honored and that governing bodies that threatened to ignore them created conditions that affected all members, not just the immediate parties. All members, not just Earth. Amara read the Dreth Statement twice, showed it to Mensah. "They're telling the Council's inner executive," he said slowly, "that if they act outside the court ruling against Earth, they've established a precedent for acting outside it against anyone." "Yes," Amara said, "including the Dreth." Vash understood that from the beginning, she said. Resolution 7 Kef, applied, consistently reaches Dreth outer territories. They voted no because it was illegal. They're speaking now because the alternative is watching an illegal precedent get enforced into permanent legitimacy. The Council's inner executive went quiet for 72 hours. Amara recognized the quality of the silence, not the silence of an institution absorbing a surprise, the silence of one conducting internal arguments that were too significant to let reach the surface while they were still unresolved. She used the 72 hours, called every outer colony governor personally, not briefings, conversations. The specific distinction mattered. She told them what had been demanded, what had been filed, what the court had ruled, and what the back-channel threat had said. She told them about the dual-use infrastructure and what it could do if the council moved regardless of the suspension. She told them about the 6 ambassadors and the Dreth Statement and the Moran and the Soul. She told them everything, because they deserved to know everything about the situation they were at the center of. Governor Ameth of Colony Kessel 9, the largest outer colony, the one the council's mineral surveys had prioritized most highly, spoke last. He was 67, had governed Kessel 9 for 19 years, had built 3 universities and a water reclamation network, and a cultural archive that contained the records of 11 species who had passed through the system across 4 centuries. Director Solis, he said when she finished, "Are we going to be all right?" She thought about 4,000 years of framework court precedent, about dual-use infrastructure, about the Dreth and the Soul, and the Moran and 5 other species whose statements had joined the public record in the past 36 hours. "Yes," she said, "but I want you to hear it from me, directly, not from a briefing document." She paused. "We are not going to let them take what you've built." He was quiet for a moment. 19 years, he said. "I know," she said. "The universities." "I know," she said again. "We're not leaving." "No," she said. "You're not." The council's inner executive ended its silence on day 4. Not with enforcement action. Not with the mechanisms beyond legal procedure that the back-channel threat had implied. With a recall. 3 members of the inner executive, the 3 whose names Earth's intelligence division had traced to the back-channel threat, were recalled from their positions pending an internal council review. Recalled. Amara read the announcement 3 times. Showed it to Una. "They're cleaning house," Una said quietly. "They're protecting themselves," Amara said. The back-channel threat becoming public made those 3 members a liability. The council is separating itself from the threat, so it can claim the threat wasn't official policy. Does that work? Legally? Una considered. It complicates things, creates distance between the council as institution and the threat as documented. She paused, but it also means 3 members of the inner executive are gone, and the remaining members have just watched what happens when the thing they do in private gets published. "They'll be more careful," Amara said. "Yes," Una said, "which means they'll be slower." She paused. "Slower is good." Counselor Vash called at 1,400 hours. 3 recalls, he said. "Yes," Amara said. "The remaining inner executive is divided," he said. "There are members who want to withdraw the demand entirely and members who believe withdrawal is a greater institutional weakness than continuing." He paused. "It is not a comfortable division." "Which side is larger?" "Currently balanced," he said, "which means the next significant development tips it." He paused. "I want to tell you something, Director. Privately." "Tell me." "When you published the back-channel threat, I considered that a significant risk. I thought it might harden the inner executive's position, make withdrawal politically impossible by making compliance look like surrender to public pressure." He paused. "I was wrong." "What changed your assessment?" "The Dreth Statement," he said. "When the Dreth spoke, the inner executive understood that this was no longer a dispute between the council and Earth. It had become a question about what kind of institution the council was." Another pause. "That question is considerably harder to answer with enforcement action than with withdrawal." Amara said nothing. Let the silence exist. "The council," Vash said carefully, "may need a path to withdrawal that doesn't look like defeat." "What would that path look like?" she said. "A mutual process," he said. "Framework court-mediated. Both parties agreeing to structured dialogue about Resolution 7 Keth's application and the compact scope." He paused. "Earth would need to agree to dialogue." "Earth has always been willing to dialogue," she said immediately. "We came to 17 years of council sessions. We voted on every resolution. We raised our concerns through proper channels." She paused. "Dialogue was never the issue." "No," Vash said quietly. "It wasn't." "Tell me what the path looks like specifically," she said, "and I'll tell you whether Earth can walk it." The path took 11 days to construct, not because it was complicated. The legal architecture was actually straightforward: framework, court-mediated dialogue, structured timeline, mutual agreement to honor the court's eventual ruling, whatever it was. Una drafted the framework in 6 hours. The 11 days were for everything around the framework, the specific political maneuvering inside the council's inner executive, the careful sequencing of which member spoke first and which followed, and what language each used, so that the withdrawal of the demand looked like the beginning of a process rather than the end of a position. Vash managed most of it. Amara led him. The formal announcement came on a Thursday. The council issued a joint statement with Earth, joint, both parties named, both seals on the document, announcing the initiation of framework, court-mediated dialogue regarding Resolution 7 Keth scope and application. The demand for governance, surrender, was not mentioned by name. It was referred to as a preliminary position, now superseded by the dialogue process. Preliminary position, the specific language of an institution that needed to move without admitting it had been wrong. Amara had agreed to that language after 40 minutes of conversation with Una, in which they examined every word from 6 different angles and determined that the substance of the outcome mattered more than the phrasing of the retreat. The colonies were not being surrendered. That was what mattered. She called Governor Ameth of Kessel 9 at 0700 hours before the public announcement. He deserved to hear it before the Galactic media did. "It's over," he said. "The demand is withdrawn," she said, formally, through a process that binds both parties to the court's eventual ruling. She paused, which, given 4,000 years of precedent on sovereignty compacts, will be ours. A long silence. "The universities are still standing," he said. "Yes," she said. "The water network." "Yes." 19 years of. "Still yours," she said. "All of it, still yours." She heard something in the silence that followed that she didn't have words for. The specific sound of relief that has been held so long it has become structural, part of how a person is carrying themselves, releasing. "Thank you," he said finally. She almost said it was nothing, stopped herself. "Because it wasn't nothing. Take care of what you've built," she said. "That's thanks enough." The Galactic media coverage ran for weeks. Not about the resolution. The resolution was the ending, and endings were less interesting than everything that had led to them. The coverage ran on the process, on what Earth had done and how and why, and what it meant that it had worked. Una gave one interview, single outlet, chosen carefully. She said 3 things that were quoted everywhere for months afterward. "We published everything because transparency is not aggression. We used the framework court because legal institutions exist to be used. And we did not comply because the compact we signed said we didn't have to." 3 sentences, complete, requiring no elaboration. Amara gave no interviews. She read the coverage, read the analysis pieces that attempted to characterize what Earth had done, some calling it masterful, some calling it reckless, some attempting to identify the moment the council's position had become untenable and arriving at different conclusions. Some said it was the framework filing. Some said it was publishing the back-channel threat. Some said it was the Dreth Statement. She thought all of them were partly right, and none of them had identified the actual moment. The actual moment was 0500 hours on a Tuesday, 11 words on a screen, and a decision made at a window overlooking Geneva before the city had fully woken up. Not a strategic decision, not a calculated response to a threat assessment or a legal opinion or a military briefing. A decision about what kind of species humanity was, whether 17 years of reliable council membership had made Earth the kind of civilization that absorbed things it should not absorb because the alternative felt too large. The answer had been no. Everything else had followed from that. Councillor Vash requested a final private call on day 14 after the announcement. She took it. He appeared on her screen with the expression she had come to recognize as his genuine one, not the performed authority of council sessions, not the careful calculation of back-channel conversations, but something older and more honest underneath both. "I want to ask you something," he said. "Ask." "The dual-use infrastructure in the outer colonies," he said. 18 months of quiet upgrades. categorized as civil development. She said nothing. You were preparing, he said, before the demand arrived, before the summit, before any of this. He studied her. How long have you known something like this was coming? Amara thought about it, honestly. About 17 years of council sessions. About resolutions that chipped at sovereignty in small ways, each one manageable, each one absorbed, each one setting the next one up. About the specific pattern that patient observation eventually makes visible. Long enough, she said. And the preparation, he said. The infrastructure. The legal research. The relationships with the 6 ambassadors. He paused. Those weren't reactive. No, she said. They weren't. You built them before you needed them. We try, she said, to build things before we need them. It's a habit. He was quiet for a moment. The council underestimated that, he said. Yes, she said. They did. They won't make that mistake again. No, she agreed. Probably not. Another pause. Neither will I, he said, and something in his translated voice carried the weight of genuine acknowledgement. Not apology, not concession, something more durable than both. Respect. She ended the call, sat for a moment in the quiet of her office. Then she opened a communication to Admiral Mensah. The infrastructure upgrades, she said. Director? Continue them, she said. All outer colonies, not just the priority systems. She paused. And start the survey work on the secondary systems, the ones we haven't mapped yet. New priority, he said. She thought about 11 words on a screen, about 31 votes, and 6, about a framework court 4,000 years old, about Governor Ameth's 19 years and 3 universities and a water network and a cultural archive, about what it meant to build things before you needed them. Same priority, she said. We just need to move faster. In the outer colonies, life continued. Students in Kessel Nine's universities attended morning classes. The Water Reclamation Network processed its daily cycle. The Cultural Archive received a new collection from a species 3 systems over who had heard about it and asked if their records could be included. Governor Ameth said yes before they finished asking. He had learned that from somewhere. He wasn't entirely sure where. In the council chamber, 31 species and 6 conducted their regular sessions, voted on resolutions, used words like framework and preliminary understanding and aspirational alignment, with slightly more care than before. Not because they had changed, because they had learned something about the cost of certain miscalculations, something the stars had apparently always known, something that 17 years of reliable treaty-honoring membership had temporarily obscured. Humanity built things before it needed them, remembered everything, and when it said no, it meant no.